No one in Pine Hollow heard the blows anymore. The town had grown used to the sound. Wood striking flesh. A girl's small cry swallowed by the wind. A door slamming. Silence. 16-year-old Eliza May Carter learned early that silence was safer than screaming. Her mother, Ruth Carter, had once been soft. People said grief had carved the kindness out of her. After Eliza's father died in a logging accident, something inside Ruth hardened like frozen river stone. Bills stacked. Winter pressed in. And every failure, every hunger pang, every broken plate became Eliza's fault. "You breathe wrong," Ruth would hiss before the first strike. Some nights it was a belt. Some nights a broom handle. Some nights just hands. Eliza stopped crying after the first year. Tears made Ruth angrier. She worked from dawn to dark, hauling water. Chopping wood too heavy for her thin arms. Cooking stew that she rarely tasted. Bruises layered over bruises. Sleeves stayed long, even in summer. No one asked questions. Until the mountain men came down. He appeared the first week of October, tall. Broad-shouldered, beard streaked with early gray. Eyes the color of storm clouds over granite. His name was Jeremiah Boone. Folks in Pine Hollow whispered about him. He lived alone past Black Ridge, in a cabin built by his own hands. Hunted elk. Trapped furs. Came down twice a year for salt, coffee, and ammunition. Didn't drink. Didn't talk much. Didn't smile at all. They said he'd buried a wife once. They said something broke in him too. Eliza saw him first at the general store. She was carrying flour, too much of it. When her ankle twisted on the warped porch board, the sack fell. Flour burst like smoke. She braced for yelling. Instead, a deep voice rumbled, "Easy." A massive hand steadied her elbow. She looked up, and felt something she hadn't in years. Not fear. Jeremiah's gaze moved over her face, then her wrists. The purple marks half hidden beneath her sleeve. His jaw tightened. "You hurt?" he asked. She shook her head automatically. Always no. Always fine. He didn't believe her. That evening, the wind carried the sound again. Wood striking flesh. Jeremiah had been loading salt into his mule cart when he heard it. His shoulders went still. Another crack. A muffled cry. The mountain air sharpened. He walked toward the Carter house. No one stopped him. Through the thin cabin walls he heard Ruth's voice, sharp and venomous. "You're useless. Useless." Another strike. Jeremiah didn't knock. The door swung inward beneath one heavy push. Ruth froze mid-swing, broom raised. Eliza was curled near the hearth. The room held its breath. Jeremiah stepped inside slowly. Like a bear entering a hunter's camp, controlled, dangerous, certain. "That's enough," he said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Ruth straightened. "This is my house." Jeremiah's eyes moved to Eliza. She flinched when he shifted, not from him, but from expectation. He saw it. Something ancient stirred. In his chest. "She's coming with me," he said. The words fell like a verdict. Ruth barked a laugh. "She's my daughter." Jeremiah stepped closer. The floor creaked under his boots. "You're killing her." The silence that followed was heavier than any winter snow. Ruth faltered, just slightly. Jeremiah held out his hand to Eliza. For a second, she didn't understand. No one had ever reached for her like that. Not to strike. Not to command. To offer. Her fingers trembled as they touched his. Ruth shouted, cursed, threatened the sheriff. Jeremiah didn't raise his voice. "You can explain to the law why half the town's heard her scream for years." Ruth's face drained of color. The mountain man's reputation wasn't just about strength. It was about justice. He'd once dragged a poacher 15 miles through snow to face charges. He wasn't bluffing. Eliza stood slowly. Her legs barely held. Jeremiah wrapped his heavy coat around her shoulders. It smelled of pine and smoke. Safe. As they stepped outside, Pine Hollow watched from behind curtains. For the first time in her life, Eliza wasn't walking back inside that door. She didn't know where Black Ridge was exactly. She didn't know what waited in the mountains. But when Jeremiah lifted her onto the mule cart and covered her with blankets, she felt something fragile bloom inside her ribs. Hope. The climb to the cabin took hours. The mountain air grew colder, cleaner. The sky widened. Eliza swayed from exhaustion. At one point, Jeremiah noticed her shivering violently. "Almost there," he said quietly. Not rushed. Not irritated. Just steady. They reached the cabin at dusk. It wasn't fancy. Rough-hewn logs. A stone chimney. Lantern light glowing warm through the window. Inside, it was clean. Orderly. A second bed in the corner, untouched for years. Jeremiah knelt in front of her and gently rolled up her sleeve. Bruises. Old and new. His jaw flexed. "No one's touching you again," he said. She didn't answer. She didn't know how to believe that yet. That night, she ate until she felt full, something she barely remembered feeling. She sat by the fire while Jeremiah heated water. He handed her a cloth. For the cuts. His hands were enormous, but careful. She whispered, barely audible, "Why?" He paused. Because he remembered another small hand slipping from his once. Because he had failed to protect someone before. Because silence had cost him too much. But he only said, "Because someone should have." Eliza lay down that night expecting shouting. Instead, she heard wind in the pines. And the steady sound of a man keeping watch. For the first time in years, she slept without fear. But down in Pine Hollow, Ruth Carter was not finished. And the mountain had its own tests waiting. If you felt your heart tighten for Eliza. If you believe stories of courage, protection, and redemption deserve to be heard, make sure you subscribe to the channel. The next chapter changes everything. Continue chapter 2, and we climb deeper into the mountain. The first week in the mountains was the quietest week of Eliza's life. And the loudest. There were no screams. No snapping belts. No sharp voice waiting to explode behind her. But silence itself felt unfamiliar, almost dangerous. She woke before dawn the first morning in Jeremiah Boone's cabin. Heart racing, certain she had overslept and punishment was coming. It wasn't. Only wind against pine. And the crackle of firewood. Jeremiah was already awake. Sitting at the rough-hewn table sharpening a blade with slow, rhythmic strokes. When he saw her standing in the doorway, frozen like a startled deer, he didn't say much. "There's oats," he said. "And honey." That was it. No command. No insult. Just food. She approached the table cautiously. Even sitting felt like she was breaking a rule. Jeremiah noticed the way she flinched when he shifted in his chair. He stood. Moved slower. Gave her space. Trauma had a language. And he was learning hers without her speaking a word. Over the next few days, he showed her simple things: how to split kindling without bruising her palms. How to check rabbit snares. How to tell when weather was turning by the smell of the air. He didn't bark orders. He demonstrated once. Then let her try. When she failed, he didn't shout. He corrected. The first time she dropped a bundle of wood and instinctively covered her head with her arms. Jeremiah went still. He crouched down until his eyes were level with hers. "No one's going to hit you here." His voice wasn't soft. It was firm. Like law. Something inside her cracked then, not from pain, but from disbelief. Down in Pine Hollow, Ruth Carter was unraveling. When the sheriff arrived at her door with questions, after neighbors finally admitted what they'd heard for years, Ruth raged. She accused Jeremiah of kidnapping, of brainwashing, of theft. But bruises tell their own story. And Pine Hollow had grown tired of pretending it heard nothing. The sheriff made the climb to Black Ridge 10 days later. Eliza saw him first, a small figure winding up the trail. Her stomach twisted into knots. Jeremiah stepped outside before the men even dismounted. "You've got nerve," the sheriff muttered. Jeremiah folded his arms. "You've got eyes. Use 'em." Eliza stood in the doorway. Sleeves rolled up deliberately for the first time in her life. The sheriff's gaze fell on the fading bruises. On the healing cuts. On the way she stood, straighter now. "You want to go back?" he asked her. The question felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. 16 years of fear tugged at her heels. But then she looked at Jeremiah. He wasn't pleading. He wasn't forcing. He simply nodded once, "Whatever you choose." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "No, sir." The sheriff studied Jeremiah one long moment. Then he tipped his hat. "She stays." When he rode away, something invisible snapped loose from her spine. For the first time in her life, someone had asked what she wanted. Winter came early that year. Snow fell thick across Black Ridge, swallowing trails and silencing the world. Food had to be rationed carefully. Jeremiah hunted less, conserving ammunition. They worked as a unit now, hauling water before the stream froze solid. Reinforcing shutters, stacking wood shoulder high. Eliza grew stronger. Her cheeks filled out. The hollow look in her eyes softened. One evening, a storm rolled in faster than predicted. Jeremiah had gone out to check trap lines before dusk. The sky turned violent, wind howling like something alive. He didn't return by dark. Fear clawed up her throat. The old voice whispered, "You're alone. You're always alone." But another voice, new, fragile, answered, "Not this time." She lit the lantern. Wrapped herself in his spare coat. And stepped into the storm. Snow bit her face. Wind shoved her sideways. But she remembered what he'd taught her: follow tree lines. Keep your back to the gusts, listen between the wind. Then she heard it. A low whistle. Jeremiah. She found him 50 yards off the main path. Leg pinned under a fallen branch heavy with ice. Blood darkened the snow near his boot. He was conscious, barely. "You shouldn't be out here," he growled through clenched teeth. "You taught me not to leave people behind," she shot back. Together, painfully. Slowly, she leveraged the branch off his leg using a broken limb as a brace. It took every ounce of strength she'd built the past month. He tried to stand. Collapsed. She slid under his arm. And half carried, half dragged him back toward the cabin. It took nearly an hour. Her muscles screamed. Tears froze on her cheeks. But she didn't stop. Not once. When they finally stumbled through the cabin door, Jeremiah's weight nearly crushed her. She managed to get him onto the bed. His leg wasn't broken, but badly torn. She heated water. Cleaned the wound. Wrapped it as best she could remember from his earlier lessons. All without trembling. At some point, as he drifted in and out of pain-clouded sleep, he looked at her differently. Not as someone he rescued, but as someone who stood beside him. "You're stronger than you think," he murmured. For the first time in her life, she believed it. By spring, word had spread beyond Pine Hollow. Some called Jeremiah reckless. Some called him a hero. But when Eliza walked into town beside him months later, head high, eyes clear, shoulders squared, no one saw a beaten girl anymore. They saw someone remade. Ruth Carter watched from across the street. Their eyes met. Eliza didn't flinch. She didn't shrink. She simply turned away. And kept walking. That summer, Jeremiah built an addition onto the cabin, not because she needed saving anymore, but because she chose to stay. One evening, sitting on the porch as the sun melted gold across the mountains, she asked him quietly, "Why did you really take me?" Jeremiah stared out at the ridgeline. "Because the world doesn't get to break good things just because it can." The wind moved through the trees. And for the first time in her life, Eliza felt chosen, not claimed. Not owned, not controlled. Chosen. The mountain hadn't just taken her in. It had given her back to herself. If this story moved you, if you believe strength can be rebuilt and kindness can rewrite a life, make sure you subscribe to the channel. More unforgettable mountain stories are waiting for you. And remember, sometimes rescue doesn't look like a hero charging in. Sometimes it sounds like a quiet voice saying, "She's coming with me."